Well, news broke just a few days ago of something very odd happening in Victoria, and I know there's potentially a very long list depending on what you choose to look at, but the thing I'm talking about in particular was an article from the Daily Mail that caught my eye to do with land acquisition for the purposes of handing back to Indigenous corporations. And as best as I could tell, it was already well underway, and up until that moment in time, I'd heard nothing about it. So I reached out to somebody who I hoped would be able to shed some light on it, and that is none other than MP or MLC David Limbrick, fat fingers there. How are you, David? Welcome back to the Aussie Wire.
I'm great, thanks. Glad to be back.
Now, this strikes me as a pretty big deal. There is an enormous amount of land. Thousands of hectares of land are now being, some of it is already public land, but a significant proportion is actually privately held land that the Victorian government plans and in some cases has already compulsorily acquired for the purpose of handing over to Indigenous corporations for management. Had you heard anything about this until the news broke recently?
Not in this particular case, no. Look, there's a lot of concerns here. Firstly, we've got the issue around compulsory acquisition. That's an infringement on property rights for a start. But secondly, how much is that going to cost? The taxpayers paying for this, of course. And then we've got the other issue of how's this all been happening? There's no parliamentary scrutiny on what's going on here. There's been no bills through Parliament that I'm aware of that have allowed this. And this is sort of happening before the treaty process that they've been talking about. This is what's happening right now. And there's lots and lots of questions here. I mean, we've already got the Parks Victoria and the EPA that are meant to be managing these parklands. Why is it that we've got traditional owner corporations? Are they going to be doing it better somehow? Pay for that? There's a lot of questions here.
So the article itself, this is the one that caught my eye initially. Now, return to traditional owners, that sounds all very well and good, but it is a relatively modern phenomenon that we're seeing come to the fore now. Prior to the Mabo decision, which happened when I was a young boy, that really was quite a novel concept. And then things seemed to settle down for a while. Where the Mabo decision was made, native title was granted over certain amounts of land. We've seen a dramatic rise recently. There's news coming out of Sydney of native title claims being made to prime real estate, waterfront real estate worth millions of dollars up in Sydney. We're now seeing the Victorian government actively working to hand back some land here. We've seen other things, and each of these issues is a separate issue, but to me they carry a theme. Climbers being locked out of the Grampians and told that they can no longer climb there when they've had access for a long time. That's part of a trend. Four-wheel drivers and hunters and cattle managers being locked out of land. What's being achieved here? What is the government, in this case the Victorian government, actually trying to accomplish here? Do we know?
We can only speculate, but I think what they're doing is preparing a lot of these things for their treaty negotiations that they've been talking about and trying to set up for a long time. I think a lot of it's got to do with that. We've seen a lot of access to different public lands being shut down or restricted in many ways. And the thing with this treaty process is it's not like one single treaty or one agreement. What the government said is that there's going to be many, many treaties that will happen over a very, very long time, apparently. And if we look at what's happening in Canada, that's been going on for decades in their treaty process, and it's still going. We have to question, really, what's the impact on property rights? Because property rights is fundamental here. It's fundamental to the stability in a free democracy. And if property rights are being eroded through these challenges and through compulsory acquisitions, then that causes lots of instability. Like, it's my understanding that some of this land that's being acquired was actually flagged for residential development. Does that mean that we're not going to get houses built that were going to be otherwise built? Are they going to turn that into parkland now? What's happened? And with the people that bought that and intended to turn it into houses, what about their plans for the future? We have to, if we're going to think about equality under law, then all of these things have to be weighed against each other.
No, you're absolutely right. Some of it certainly was zoned as urban growth zone, which means it's not residential yet, but it will be pretty soon. This is confirmation here again from the Daily Mail article. Work has already begun on handing back the land after the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action compulsorily acquired a 39-hectare site in Epping. Now, you raised the concerns around property rights. I want to raise some concerns that I have around value for the taxpayer. Compulsory acquisition, in a lot of cases, they try and lowball and they strong arm and they use the weight of government to try and essentially not pay people a fair price for their land. And inevitably, certainly when you're talking about larger parcels of land that are worth large amounts of money, that leads to enormous amounts of litigation. And I'm aware of one specific case where I know some of the parties involved, years of litigation costing millions of dollars, and then eventually the government actually then had to up their price to a fair price. So the taxpayer was screwed in every single direction. We're talking about a lot of land being acquired from a lot of different owners. This could become an absolute legal nightmare, couldn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if the owner challenges it in court, then yeah, it could be a very expensive exercise for the taxpayer. Either way, like they might have paid a very high price for this land too, and that's going to be expensive for the taxpayer as well. I mean, ultimately, the taxpayer gets shafted any way you look at it. But I don't see what the objective is here, and they haven't been very clear and transparent about it. If they're going to be spending large amounts of taxpayer money, the least they can do is at least put it through Parliament and, let us examine what they're trying to do and make a decision on it. It seems like this is all very secretive, and it's problematic that you find out about it from a Daily Mail article.
I know. Now, from my perspective, compulsory acquisition is a troubling thing. If it was for a hospital or for a necessary freeway or something like that, I think there's more of a case to be made. I'm still not comfortable with it, but there's more of a case to be made. But compulsory acquisition for the purpose of parks seems to me to be an abuse of the reason why those powers were given to the government in the first place. Final point here, advocates agree that traditional owners will have to be sufficiently resourced to look after the park. And once again, this is from that Daily Mail article. Aren't we essentially just replacing the existing Parks Victoria with a whole bunch of new bodies? How does this fit with the existing? I mean, we've already got park management, don't we?
We do, and it raises another question, like why are we limiting the ability? Like, all right, let's say we do want to hand it over to the Traditional Owners Corporation. Why don't they have the ability to make money out of it? Why does it need to be taxpayers funding this? Are the public going to still have access to this land or not? We've seen what's happened out in with the Grampians and this sort of thing, and other places. Are people still going to have access? And if they don't have access, if taxpayers don't have access, why should they be paying for it?
Look, it's one of these stories where there are far more questions than answers, and every time you look for an answer, you just come back with even more questions. We'll certainly stay on top of this story here at the Aussie Wire, and David Limbrick MLC, we appreciate your time. We hope that if you do learn anything concrete or anything further on this story, we'll have you back on to bring that update to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.